I do not understand how this could be happening in a community that I've been in for 30 plus years. I do not understand how it could become so sloppy. It is sloppy. This is sloppy medicine. This is sloppy mental health care. This is completely about something that, why would you want to fast track? And I use that term fast track because you don't have to have, so let me just explain to your people out there. So as a 20-year-old, even as a 16-year-old, if you have your parents' consent, you can walk into Planned Parenthood. You can have a 45-minute evaluation by a gender affirmative therapist, whatever that means. And that means in 45 minutes they could say, yep, you're trans, which about 99% of the time they do it. And right then and there, you're getting your first testosterone shot. So you tell me how that is positive medicine. That is not positive medicine. That is fast-tracking kids into a way and a means to do what? Why do you want these kids to be trans so fast?
Welcome to the Veritas podcast. I'm Scott Veritas, and today I'm joined by adult film producer, performer, and sex educator Buck Angel. Buck, thanks so much for being on the show.
Right on. No, thanks for having me. I totally appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been very excited to talk to you, Buck, ever since I feel like I came across you. I don't know if it was on Twitter or one of your other interviews a couple years ago. And I've always been like, there's a person I want to talk to. I've had this podcast for a little while, and I had Colin Wright on a few weeks ago, and he mentioned you, and I was like, yes, I should absolutely talk to Buck. So I was really happy when I heard back from you, and I'm very excited to have you on. Your background it's very different from a lot of the kinds of people that I talk to on this show. So I'll start off by just asking you if you could go into kind of what your story is, and particularly how you became not just a public figure, but a somewhat controversial public figure at that.
The key word there being controversial.
Exactly.
I just don't want to be some celebrity. I want to be the controversial. I do actually. It's like, It's not that I even think of myself as a celebrity. So that's sort of like over there. But that being said, yes, I'm very controversial. So for the people out there who don't know me, I was born female, so I'm a biological female who transitioned late in life, in my late 20s, early 30s, I think, 29 years ago, to live my life as a man. And so on some level, I had a sex change, right, which we used to call that. I'm a transsexual man. And now, so really that's the basis of my story. And now, 29 years into transition, things have changed a lot around the transgender/transsexual community. And, it's I think it's probably why we're sitting here. It's becoming kind of toxic on some level. And for somebody like myself, that my transition saved my life, and it's been a gift to me that I cannot even really express to you, that it saved my life. And so I have a lot of respect around my transition, and also I have a respect around understanding what my role is in the world today as a transsexual man, and how I don't necessarily agree with what's going on, and that I need to step up and speak out. And so I think that's kind of where my role in the world is today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering if maybe you could elaborate more on just what it's been like to be a transsexual man who does not necessarily subscribe to all of the political ideology and the political positions that a lot of, they use the umbrella term LGBT organizations and media outlets. They imply through their advocacy that everyone who is trans or gay or any one of the letters, that they all have the same views on things, but you don't necessarily subscribe to those views. What's that been like for you socially and personally over the course of your life?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I've had an amazing transition. People have been very respectful.
Yeah.
I started in pornography for my career, which, again, could I have picked a worse profession? It's like the most horrifying profession you can ever get into, because people just hate porn. They blame it on everything. But I'll tell you that I like my pornography work, and I think my pornography work has been very instrumental in me being where I am today. But that being said, it's not for everybody, and that's okay. It was my choice and what I do. But I don't literally live in that world so much anymore. I sort of so transitioning into that, doing that, really getting my ass beat up for being in porn. Really, it had me grow a thick skin. I think that's why I'm able to be this guy I am today, because I've been beat up since I started doing porn. So I've learned how to deal. So today we have this new idea of transgender, right? And it's nothing to do with me. Like I said earlier, I had a sex change. I transitioned from living as a female, which I am still biologically female, to now living, look at me. I mean, I don't think anyone would question that I live as a
Yep.
man, right? And it's pretty basic. It's always just been basic for me. And that's why you and people are just very respectful. Oh, okay, I see what Buck needed to do. He needed to save. I wouldn't be here if I didn't do that. It actually did save my life. And so I respect the fact that I still am a biological female, and I will never deny that. It's the reason I'm a trans person. Biology is literally the reason you're trans. And so now we're having this new ideas coming into this LGBTQIA plus blah, blah, blah community that has taken us to a space that is not only detrimental to my own community, but to the world. And there's people in this community who are pushing false narratives, pushing on things that are very fascist in a way to control our language and tell us that we have to speak a certain way. Let me just use the example of pronouns, because probably all your listeners know the pronoun story. I refuse to put my pronouns down, and not because I disrespect you and your pronouns, but because for me, the whole reason I transitioned is to look male. And if you have to ask my pronouns, then my sex change totally sucked. And that's, then I didn't do a good job. And so it's on some level humiliating for me to have to tell you my pronouns. And so I think where we're at today in this idea that pronouns and gender and all these things are at the forefront of what we need to do as trans people is hurting my community and hurting the whole reason why people transition. It should never be in a political space. It's a very, very personal space, and it's a very much of a space to just get from A to B, if that makes sense. It's not a space that we should be pushing the way we are, this narrative. It's not fun, and it's not something I wished I was a trans person. I wish I was. I wish I wasn't. I wish I was like you. I wish I was just born a man. So in a nutshell, that's kind of like what's happening. This weird narrative is coming up that does not in any way align with where I'm at, and I have to speak out about it.
Yeah, well, what you're saying is one of the reasons I think you're such an important voice and someone I was so excited to talk to is that you really speak to the politicization of what is a very personal, in your case and in many people's cases, originally really almost everyone's cases, medical issue. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because in my experience, I'm a relatively young guy. I'm 20. I just turned 27, and so I've had a weird experience where, thank you. I had my birthday a couple weeks ago.
Excellent.
But in my experience, I had a weird thing where I remember growing up around sort of an interesting time in the gay rights and the trans rights movement, and then around like 2012, 2013, it seemed like that's when things started to change in a really weird way. And I actually started college in 2013. So I was at a university environment. Things were very, very strange and intense where I was. But what I wanted to ask you, Buck, was in your experience, having been trans for several decades now, I mean, you began your transition in the 80s, as I understand it.
Well, yeah.
When did you notice that it was starting to become more politicized? And what was it like for you seeing that process unfold at the time from your perspective?
It just gives me chills. It's like seeing something happening and no one else is seeing it happen, and you're like, I kind of think this is not a good thing, and I'm raising my hand going, wait a minute here, and they're like, shut up, Buck, you're old. That's basically what I've been getting from the younger generation. Shut up, Buck, we got it. Someone actually said, we've got it now, you can go sit down. I'm like, oh, wow, that's so insane. That immediately lit a fire under my ass. I'm like, wait a minute here. Now you're going to tell me you're going to take over after all the amount of time and energy I put into sort of really educating the world around a person like myself.
Yeah.
And not that I need anything. I don't want anybody to think that I do what I do in order to give me praise or to become a celebrity. That's never been my space. I really do think of myself as an activist, even though I don't use that term anymore because it's really been taken over by a bunch of wingnuts and it's become political in a way that I don't agree with. So that being said, yeah, I saw it coming. I actually saw the train wreck coming, and I was yelling, but no one was listening to me. And so today what we have is such a train wreck because it is not trans. When you start saying you don't need dysphoria, they literally took an actual diagnosis, mental health thing. I have a mental health problem, okay? I have an actual diagnosis. It's real. That being said, it's called gender dysphoria, and actually this new generation is saying you don't need dysphoria to be trans. That just was like mind-blowing to me because the whole point of being trans is that you have gender dysphoria. You're off. You don't feel right. You can't walk the world as a woman or a man. And so then to say you don't need dysphoria says anyone can be trans. And then that means self-ID. Anyone can self-diagnose themselves as trans. I'm like, wait, but why? Why would you want to be trans? That was always my question. I don't want to be trans, right? I don't want cancer. If I have it, it's like saying I have cancer, but I don't have cancer on some level, right? This is an actual disorder. I don't care what anybody else says. It's an actual mental disorder, and that's where it needs to stay. But it's been taken to this space where it's like they want people to be trans, and that actually upsets me, and it makes me feel that I had a choice, and I don't have a choice. This is who I am and what I have to be in order to stay alive. So do you understand what I'm saying? Like, to
Absolutely,
take something like that and make it into something like, everyone should be trans is so insane to me.
It's almost become somewhat of, especially among younger people, it's like a social trend.
That's
it's
right.
like a fashion.
That's
and
right.
that is something that I would imagine has been extremely disturbing for you to see unfold.
Yes.
And it's disturbing for everyone. I mean, Abigail Shrier did a whole
Yes.
book about particularly young women
right.
who, in many cases, they are autistic or they have a mental health problem or they're insecure for whatever reason. Maybe they're overweight, underweight, and that is preyed upon by a sort of weird underground culture that doesn't have to do with transsexual people like you who've been living this way for decades and have been medically transitioning. But there's a word of almost trans evangelism that is, as you said, trying to get more people to be trans, which is a strange aspect of the new culture that's come up that I try to understand, but I fail.
Good luck.
Most of the time.
If I can't understand it, you ain't gonna understand it. And I don't want you to understand it.
Yeah.
I want you to understand it as a way that's called indoctrination, because that's full-blown indoctrination. And if you want to take it to the next level, my friend, I pay attention because I care about these kids. This saved my life. I'll keep saying it to you. It saved my life. It's not that I don't want people to transition. 100% I do. And I want them to be like me and move forward through the world and create your space, not be trans. But that being said, when I start seeing kids detransition, which means, for the people out there who don't understand, it means somebody like me deciding, oops, I made a mistake. Never mind, I'm actually a woman. Could you imagine if I did that? So kids are doing that now. 20-year-old kids have cut their breasts off, have hysterectomies.
How hard that is on the body, because it's hard enough to transition to begin with. I know you know that, Buck. And so to go back...
There is no going back. This is irreversible on so many levels. And for the insanity and the actual lies that come out of it, this is irreversible. For them to say it's not, that it's reversible is a complete lie. All the testosterone in my body has destroyed parts of my body, and I'm willing to take that on, but they're not talking about the bad aspects of putting testosterone. I'm a female, remember that. I'm a biological female. When you start putting testosterone on a biological female's body, what do you think happens? I mean, this is not natural to my body, so things are gonna be off. And I could just go on and on, but the fact is that I'm starting to see a large group of detransitioning young girls, right? Girls who transition to be men and now realize they're actually women. And how is that happening? And why are we not talking about that?
Yeah, and it's devastating for, I can only imagine. Everybody knows young girls, in their teens and 20s, they're very sensitive about their appearance and about, at some point, probably looking feminine. If they are heterosexual and they want to date men, they're going to try and look feminine. I know that, by the way, that in and of itself is politically correct.
Totally.
So, that women want to look feminine. But, I really feel for women who intentionally masculinized themselves. And in your case, that worked out really well, and that's great. But in some cases, as you said, they actually end up, I'll say, wanting to go back, but they can't, and it's going to affect their dating life. It's going to affect, it can affect their ability to have children.
Yeah, there you go.
As you said, it is irreversible, and that is one of the truly irreversible aspects, the fertility aspect, and it does feel predatory. And that's the part that I don't understand, because we think of, I talked about this in my interview with Colin as well. We think of the medical and scientific world as truly above reproach. And I would say up until relatively recently, that was somewhat justified, that these are the people who are the word clinical is a medical word. They are clinical in their approach to medicine, in their approach to the care of their patients. And what is the first thing they're supposed to do? Do no harm.
That's right.
And the fact that those scientific institutions they seem to have been somewhat of the last domino to fall as this ideology, and I guess I'll ask you about this. Do you consider this all to just be kind of its own unique, insulated thing, or do you consider it part of the umbrella term that is woke? Like, do you think that it falls into kind of the way I think of it, wokeness has there's the trans and LGBT aspect, there's the racial aspect, there's the feminist aspect, and they're all kind of working towards this one overarching ideology, this umbrella ideology. Do you think that that's accurate, or do you think that that actually might not be?
Oh
the
no,
best way
I
to
do think
describe
that's
it?
I do think that's accurate because I do not understand how this could be happening in a community that I've been in for 30 plus years. I do not understand how it could become so sloppy. It is sloppy. This is sloppy medicine. This is sloppy mental health care. This is completely about something that, why would you want to fast track? And I use that term fast track because you don't have to have, so let me just explain to your people out there. So as a 20-year-old, even as a 16-year-old, if you have your parents' consent, you can walk into Planned Parenthood. You can have a 45-minute evaluation by a gender affirmative therapist, whatever that means. And that means in 45 minutes they can say, yep, you're trans, which about 99% of the time they do it. And right then and there, you're getting your first testosterone shot. So you tell me how that is positive medicine. That is not positive medicine. That is fast-tracking kids into a way and a means to do what? Why do you want these kids to be trans so fast? That's why I, as an older person, I'm like, no. You're not even giving them any mental health care. You're just giving them medication. That's sick. That's actually sick.
Buck, what do you think made it so that we could make that flip? Because at one point, like I imagine for your process, it was much harder, it was a much longer process, and I mean a better process, because of course this should take time. There should be a little bit of questioning of what's going on to see what other possibilities there are. I know that one of the things that, again, you're not supposed to say this, but I'll say it because it's the kind of show that I do, is that a lot of men who are thinking of transitioning to women, it turns out they're gay, and they can live a perfectly happy life as a gay man. That's something that Dr. Deborah So talks a lot about in the work that she's been doing. A lot of great people I want to have on my show, by the way. I'll be reaching out to them as well.
Do that. And
but
if you need any connections, I'm connected to all of them. They're good people.
Oh, thank you.
They'll be on your show in a minute. They're all good people. Yeah,
I appreciate that very much because this is a really important issue to me, and it's been one that, again, just because of my age, I saw it really flip on a dime in a really weird way, and that's what I wanted to ask you: is when exactly did it get to that point where you could get that 45-minute evaluation? Was that like around 2010? Is that?
Oh God, I think actually
before then, maybe.
I think, let's see, where are we? We're 2022 now. I would say in the last 5 to 10 years, but I'd say more 5. Has been the push. So
really,
and how did so here's what I want to say. I'm actually a supporter of Planned Parenthood when it comes to women's reproductive health. I've always been. I always think they're an amazing organization. But once they got into gender healthcare, how did they get into gender healthcare? And what makes them a space that they're able to be in gender healthcare? Do you understand what I'm saying? What are the things you need to do to apply to be this person? What are the things you do to say that I'm a clinic that has trans healthcare? What does that even mean? Now, do you know that testosterone is I think it's like a category 3 controlled substance or something? It's an actual controlled substance. You need a prescription to get it. It's completely illegal. Like, you need to go to a doctor. And how did Planned Parenthood get into a space to actually write prescriptions for testosterone? Do you know you can go on the internet and have a Zoom meeting with a doctor who can then write you a prescription for testosterone? Like, what's happening? That testosterone has always been a very difficult thing to get for a reason. It's not candy and it's not reversible. It is irreversible. So I'm just like, I don't understand how we, other than what I'm going to tell you is money. Always follow the money trail. It's a real thing. And you can start to see trans surgeries, trans healthcare. It's becoming an actual industry.
Yeah, one of the things that I've posited and talked to some of my other guests about, because you mentioned a time frame that it sounds about right to me, 14, 15, 16 maybe is when we seem to turn on a dime, is that I always say there was perhaps, because I just think about that time frame, and I'm like, what could make a society flip 180 degrees on this type of issue so quickly? And I think about social media, because one thing, there was no social media in the 90s. The internet barely existed in the 90s. And then in the early 2000s, it's in its infancy. And I always say that it felt like it feels like there's like a 4 to 5 year delayed effect where if something is working its way around social media, whether it's Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook, it'll slowly leach its way into more mainstream spaces. And that we've seen this with Black Lives Matter, with certain feminist ideology stuff, but then especially with the LGBT stuff. And that is one of the theories that I posit, but I'm not somebody who's researched it. One person I'll just recommend, there's a woman named, her screen name is Default Friend on Twitter, and she does a lot of research into Tumblr and fandom and TikTok and how those social media formats have influenced these issues and other issues. Have sort of contributed to the woke phenomenon.
Okay, great.
But I mean, how much have you thought about that, or are there other things that you think could have caused the 180-degree turn?
Oh no, dude, you hit it on the head. 100% it's social media. There's no other way this could have spread like a goddamn contagion. Seriously, there's no way. I'm watching the things these kids say to me are outrageous. Like, go fuck yourself. Yeah. I'm like, what? You are actually talking to a transsexual man telling me to go, that I'm transphobic, that I'm a TERF, that it's just so I'm like, wait a minute, that is not the trans community. That is never have I been spoken to like that, especially by youngsters. They've always respected my space. They know I come from a different space. We respect you. Never have I been bombarded by a bunch of, and I'm going to say it, they're not trans people. These people are taking this on as a means and a way to identify. I don't identify. This is not an identification. I didn't choose this to identify. This is an actual medical condition. There's a difference between taking it on as an identity. I'm trans. Trans is beautiful. Yay for trans. What's that? We never did that. We were like, we didn't talk about it. It was like, we did this. We wanted to get back in the world. So that's why I'm like, who are these kids? Why are they connecting to trans in this way? Because it's being fed to them as a means and a way to be a part of, right? Because all kids want to be a part of a group, number one. Number two, it's being fed to them as a means and a way to become a better person and that you'll be happier, which is actually showing that it's not true because so many kids are detransitioning. And if you read the stuff these kids are saying, it will make you, I literally cry reading it. Like, I wish I never did it. It ruined my life. Nobody helped me. I didn't get any therapy. I just walked into Planned Parenthood and got, believe me, you watch, the lawsuits are coming, my friend, and I've been saying it. These kids are going to start speaking up and saying, I should have never done it. And so that to me says so much about why did these kids get pushed into this. They went on their phones and they got on TikTok and all this stuff, and they were just seeing other people happier, right? They were seeing other people going, I'm trans, yay, I got my top surgery, I got, and then it's a fashion statement or something. I'm like, who does that? And why would you lure? It's on some level luring these kids into feeling that this is going to change everything for them and they're going to become happier people when they become worse, mentally messed up worse by doing the transition when they should have never done the transition.
Yeah, well, it's a big part of what you do is giving you talk about your positive experiences. That's I know right. you're happy to have become a trans man. Right. I'm very happy for you, but you talk about the negative experiences. Right. You talk about the challenges. Mm-hmm. And if you leave that part out, it is frankly ridiculous. I mean, I can't imagine that anyone has had an easy transition. No. I don't think that's a thing. No. For it to just be like, whoop, like there I go.
Well, the kids that aren't doing what I did, which is actually take on medical, blah, blah, blah. There are kids out there who are just trans, right? Who don't have dysphoria. Yeah. I'm like, then actually, you're not trans. And then I get beat up for saying that, right? Anyone can be trans, Buck. I'm like, wow, really? So you see what I mean? Then they're not doing surgeries. They're not doing what I do. But they're calling themselves the same as me. So that's where I said, wait a minute here. Me and you are completely different. I could never live in the world like that. I could never live with my breasts or looking female or any of that and calling myself a man. I could never do that. So I'm different than this newer generation. And that's where I decided to say, no. There's a difference between a transsexual person and a transgender person. And then that's where I cut the line. And then that's when a lot of people started saying, I'm transsexual. Because I don't relate. And then that's when that newer community kind of got mad at me because they said I'm making a hierarchy. I said, but wait a minute, kids, this is no hierarchy. It's different. I'm not saying I'm better than. I'm saying I'm different than. That's what you're not. These kids are being fed a bunch of crazy stuff that is being, and when you get 5,000 kids together, that's powerful. And they can all scream the same kind of ideology. That can be an extremely powerful space. So I think they've indoctrinated so many kids to have this idea that they're not thinking about anything else and they're just pushing against people who they think are pushing against them.
Yeah, I think that to bring it back to kind of the overarching ideology of wokeness, I think one of the reasons what you do, Buck, is considered so provocative or so controversial by these people is because you do, with your position, which is it's pretty much the same as my position and a lot of people's position on this issue, which is that there is an important difference between being a transsexual and being somebody who they are biologically male, but they identify as a woman.
That's right.
When you do that, you do create somewhat of a barrier to entry to get a piece of what I'm going to call the social justice pie.
Yes.
I mean, I again, this is the kind of show that I do. These are all things that, who knows if this will even make it on YouTube? No, of course. I've never been taken on YouTube, to YouTube's credit, but anyway, it will make its way on.
No, the reason I'm here, Scott, is because you are open to having the conversation. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like everything is okay. No, that's not the kind of stuff I want to talk about. I want to talk about the real hard shit that nobody wants to talk about. And that's what you want to do. We need to have this conversation.
Yep, for sure.
We have to have the conversation because kids are being hurt. I don't care about any adult that makes a choice to cut their boobs off and move forward. That's you're an adult. If you made a mistake, I'm sorry, dude, but you're going to have to deal with that. I'm talking about kids, 18 under, who are being on some level indoctrinated into this idea without doing their homework or understanding that this is forever I'm a trans person, and forever I have to shoot testosterone, and forever I have to go to the gym, and forever I have to make myself look as masculine. This isn't natural. This is all man-made.
Yeah, well, and these kids are being presented with what I was referring to as like the social justice pie.
That's right.
And it's telling them, like, how do you get affirmation that you might not be getting from your parents, from your peers, from that girl you like or that guy you like? How do you get that? How do you become one of the popular kids, one of the kids who gets all the likes on Facebook, all the likes on Twitter? Social media and the presentation of that social justice pie, they create incentives to become trans even if you don't have gender dysphoria, which has had I'm not even calling them unintended, but they've had consequences that we have seen reach a point of just utter chaos is the way I'm going to describe it. I mean, when we have biological men swimming against biological women that we've seen recently, there are things that like the combat sports. I know there's a situation where somebody got their freaking face bashed in because they were boxing a biological man.
Yes.
It was UFC fighter.
That was Fallen Fox, who me and her got into a big fight because I told her, you know what, that is rude of you. And she's all, I go, no, I went on Joe Rogan to talk about that because I was like, no. I was one of the very first people to be like, no, not cool. And I got my ass beat by the community. But I'm like, what's wrong with everybody in this community pretending like just because you want to be a woman, you are a woman? I'm not a man. I'm an actual transsexual man. There's a big difference between me and you, dude. And I have to respect that. In order for you to respect me, I need to respect your space. And when you have trans women coming in saying, we're women, go fuck yourself, we're going to take over, that does nothing for the trans movement except make everybody pissed off at us. And it is cheating on some level. I'll continue to say it. It is not cool for that woman to be swimming against biological women. She's slaughtering them. It's gross.
Yeah, and there's the chill factor where nobody can talk about it. I mean, the stories that we've been hearing are basically that these girls are crying in the locker room when they're losing by 40 laps, and that the moms are having to basically you don't get to hear directly from the girls except anonymously, and then some of the moms are anonymously doing interviews. I think of Barry Weiss. Yep. So somebody was able. It might not have been Barry Weiss. Maybe it was Barry Weiss. Somebody got one of the moms anonymously. Yep. But I keep saying anonymously because that's one of the things that drives me crazy is the chill factor, the fear.
Yes.
Of just saying what we're saying right now. I mean, even I was saying before, I don't want to get kicked off YouTube. They could terminate my channel.
You won't.
I don't think they will.
No, because why you won't?
and I'll ask them politely not to.
Because why you won't is because I'm a trans person. So you're not going to. You are actually having the conversation with a real, actual transsexual person. They can't. They cannot call this transphobic. They can't call it anything because I'm telling you my story. You're asking me questions. So that's why it would be actually hugely beneficial and huge PR if they try to take this off, because we can literally make this a PR story. So let's hope they do. We can blow you up, dude.
Yeah, YouTube, your move, Susan Wojcicki. Your move, YouTube. But yeah, no, what you're saying is very important, and it's one of the reasons I was so excited to have you. You're my first trans guest that I've had on the show. I've talked to people about this issue, but none of them have actually been trans themselves. Okay. And people like yourself are very important in this issue, as they always are. Like I said, there are issues of race where if you have a black person or Latino person, the term they use is person of color. I'll just say minority. Somebody who is an ethnic minority. If you have them talking about these things in a way that is surprising, let's say, that doesn't necessarily go along with the line, that doesn't go with the accepted politics of their community. Same thing with women who speak out against the extremities, the extremeness of some forms of feminism. That people like you who are saying, I'm a part of this community. And so, kind of like you were saying, it is sort of proof positive. It's like not everyone who talks about this is a bigot, and the best way to prove that is to be like, Here I am. You know, there's you, Buck.
That's
You're
right.
a trans person.
I'm actually a real trans person who transitioned before pretty much more than half the people you see with their big mouths flapping out there. So I have built my space here, and that's why I get respect, because I'm only stepping up because what I see is dangerous. If I just thought whatever is happening and it's growing, excellent, I'm going to move on and do my other shit. But I cannot stand around, and I have integrity, and I will not stand around and let this lies and deceit and the way they attack, like the way they attack J.K. Rowling is so insane.
Oh, Jesus.
It is insane. I will not be a part of that. And in fact, J.K. Rowling is cool with me. There is no, so I'm like, I wanted to prove she's not transphobic. If she was transphobic, she would never have a conversation with me. I'm like the tranny porn star weirdo. Like I'm like way over there, right? And she like,
you're an OG. You've been around for a while.
She's not transphobic. You can even I can pull the pieces out where she even says stuff like great, amazing, beautiful stuff about trans people. That was never her, but they gaslight. You see what they do? They gaslight. They get everybody to say the same shit, and that's very what Hitler did with the youth, right? Hitler brought the youth in because youth are very powerful, and then you can actually not push against kids. So they have these young TikTokers and all these people just, you know, J.K. Rowling is a tranny, as a transphobe, as a TERF, and it just keep putting that out there. The rest of the world sees that and sort of grabs onto it. And I won't be a part of the lies and deceit. It's deceitful.
Yeah, and the level of aggression and vitriol and abuse that you were referencing, particularly, you know, J.K. Rowling, I think that one of the reasons she is such a big target is, one, she's uncancelable, and so she kind of, I think that when some of the activists are running at her, they feel like they're running into a brick wall, and it frustrates them and makes them want to run at her, and so that's why she gets so much abuse, because like there's, and it's, you know, Joe Rogan is similar. There are certain people that are, they're a brick wall of uncancelability, and so they just attract a level of vitriol that is kind of insane to watch, because it sort of snowballs and builds on itself. And then also the fact that J.K. Rowling is so unassailable. I mean, she is, I mean, this is a woman who retroactively made Dumbledore gay. I mean, this is not somebody who is not cool with the LGBT community. I mean, she literally was like,
I mean, that's why it's so fucking ridiculous, and it pisses me off, and I will not. It's a literal witch hunt. It's an actual witch hunt. I'm watching it. I'm like, oh, bullshit. You people are totally full of shit. And I stood up. I stayed up for her, and for Dave Chappelle. Both of them are not transphobic. Right. And it's sickening that we actually take people who could help us and really help to do so many great things for our community. And same with Caitlyn Jenner, who's actually an amazing person who's given a lot of money to the trans community, and they just fucking beat her up constantly. And that says to me right there, they just want to shut the voices that don't toe the party line. And that's where I'm like, nope, you guys are a cult. Done. That's not part of my game.
Caitlyn Jenner is fascinating, because with Caitlyn Jenner, I think about the timeline we were talking about before. So when did she come out? I believe it was around 2015, maybe, right? Yes. So it's like, and that was a big moment of visibility for trans people. That was one of the first times, if, let's say hypothetically, someone had not heard of you or Chaz Bona or some of these other people, if they hadn't heard of you or some of these other people, Caitlyn Jenner was the first time they were seeing a trans person. That's right. And that was a huge moment. I think she won Woman of the Year, which... We
well, people got pissed, but I get it.
But you know, it was a big moment, and the fact that she ended up being discarded because it turned out she's conservative. It's just like,
so what?
You know, and
right? Like now, we as trans people have to all act and be like. I know a ton of Republican LGBT people, tons of them. No matter, people are moving out of the left because it's so. This is the shit that they're doing, right? Like, I'm totally liberal, 100%, but I'm not part of that left space movement. I don't agree with a ton of it. It's way too, I don't even think it's liberal. It's something else. It's just so insane. And so, because Caitlyn Jenner is a Republican, woo, big deal, it doesn't matter. She's still part of our family. And that's the thing that these people are missing out on. They're not building family. That's where I come from in the LGBT space. We were about family. We were about building family and always making sure that we had each other's back. Even though we might not have the same political beliefs or we might not be in the same LGBT space, we always had each other's back. And that's the community that I don't see anymore. I see some weird torn apart, homophobic. I see the trans community becoming very homophobic on some level, and that totally freaks me out. I'm like, what? Like, it just is... it's tearing us apart, and it's killing me, and it's killing actual people who have gender dysphoria for reals.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think I can imagine how much it has degraded the community from within, because when you think of a community like LGBT community, the community you've been a part of for so long, a big part of it is accepting the limitations of it, and the fact that maybe it is a little underground or alternative, and that's what part of what makes it unique. There's a great saying, I forget who said it, but there's a great saying that a group is not defined by who you let in, but who you keep out. A group does not exist if everyone's allowed in. It's not a group anymore, right?
That's right.
And so now what we've seen is, I don't even think mainstream is the right word. This set of ideas has made transsexuality, transgender, it's made it into like a cause celebre, and a wedge issue, and something that is, it's not just popular, it's like I said before, it's a social trend. It's a fashion sense in many cases, and I can imagine that for you, it's given you a sense of like, what the hell happened to my community? Like we can't. I imagine that it's difficult because now everyone's trying to get a piece of the pie. You have all these politicians who wouldn't pay you any mind before. Right. I mean, Hillary Clinton didn't even support gay marriage until like 2013 or whatever. And then all of a sudden they're swooping in, and you have all the advocacy groups. You have a medical industry that we were kind of talking about before. And it's interesting because I imagine that there have been positive aspects to it. So for instance, I would concede, and I'm curious from your perspective, do you feel like the broad acceptance of being trans has increased over the course of the past 10, 20 years? Or do you feel like it was already like acceptable to the point that you were fine, like in the 90s and 80s and 2000s? Like, has it kind of been a blessing and a curse?
That's a great, on some level. But here's what I want to say is, I was living life amazing. I was out there traveling the world, speaking all over the world. Never had I had any issues. And I don't know, again, we got to remember that trans women and trans men have completely different experiences. So when I talk to you about trans, I'm really talking about the trans male space. I can't really, and that's what trans women need to do. When trans women are speaking, they need to speak about their own space and not use trans.
It would be very different.
It would be very different. Point.
It would be a very different experience.
But when we speak about trans now, we speak about trans as if we're all the same. We're not. So first off, let's just talk about trans men and trans women. Totally different spaces, right? And then let's talk about dysphoria, non-dysphoria, non-binary. You know what I mean? There's like now all these levels of the whole thing that has literally, that's what's destroyed us. But that being said, I do think I was in my life felt much more accepted in the world than I do today. I spoke less about my gender. I spoke less about my biology. I have never had to talk about being a biological female more in my life. Can you imagine? More in my life I have to be, I'm a biological female. And you know, it's just fucking ridiculous because I wanted to get away from that. But that being said, I have to say it because the shit that's being said is lies and deceitful. And so, no, I think on some level, you all might see this like acceptance of trans people, and we see President Biden go, "Don't worry, transgender people, I have your back and I'll always have your back." I'm like, wow, you people think he actually means that? Now we've become a political pawn in the game of whatever the fuck's going on. And that's what my community doesn't see. We're being used. We're actually being used in order to give people brownie points, to help them get into office, when they're going to turn their back on us in 2 fucking seconds, like they always do. But we are this sort of political pawn. And so I refuse to be used in that space. And because that's why I always go back to, I have a medical condition. You are going to use my medical condition in this way and means to like just indoctrinate people into it is sick. It's so I think, and on some level they're really hurting us more than they're helping us, because I see backlash, right? I see Texas laws and I see Florida laws, and then I'm seeing that's just the beginning. It's going to get worse when you start transitioning children. Forget it. All bets are off. The whole world's going to freak out on that.
Yeah. What you said was really helpful, because I think that the way I framed the question before, it wouldn't be the way to frame the question, because I used the word acceptance. Okay. And it's like this sort of transcended acceptance at some point, right? Like acceptance was increasing, and then it sort of peaked at one point, and then it transcended into being celebrated in a way that is sort of perverse, whether you like it or not, to the point where the unintended consequence has been, that's a really good point, that you wouldn't have to say before that you're a biological woman, because it's implied. Like people would know, like, okay, this is a trans man, you can't change your biology. You understood that, people you were speaking to understood that, that was just there. And the fact that you even have to say it now, I'm sure it's frustrating for you. It's frustrating for everybody, because it's not acceptance, it's making people question basic realities that they shouldn't have to question. And this was, the social contract with this issue before, it kind of reached a pretty good equilibrium, I imagine, like right before this stuff kind of started, where again, you could live your life being accepted, but then it transcended acceptance. It turned into like, oh, but of course you are a man biologically, you are a woman biologically, and it's like, wait, no, and then you get into this weird space.
That's right, and so that's those. I call them the TRAs, right? The trans radical activists. They're the ones who are causing all this shit, and they're the ones who are trying to take biology off the table. They do that for a reason. They're trying to take biology off the table so that they can just be men and women. And I'm like, but you're ruining it for trans people when you do that, because I need for my doctor to know that I'm a biological female forever, because I can't go to the same doctor I don't need a prostate exam. I need a gynecologist. So right there, that makes me and you different men. And so if you start saying my biology doesn't count, you're putting me in danger. That's dangerous beyond belief. And so that's why I'm like, what is the ultimate goal these people want? What is it that they actually are trying to manipulate? Because they're gaslighting, manipulating, lying, deceitful, all of it. What is it that they want? So I start to think, oh, I get it. They want to dominate. They want to take over. And that's what they're trying to do. They're literally not trans men so much as trans women, these TRA trans women. They're literally, that's one of the ones that are like, trans women are women, trans women are women, this mantra, when trans women are not women. Trans women are trans women. Big difference, my friend. And so when you don't say it, what happens? You get called a transphobe, you get called a TERF. They're actually kind of smart in the way that they manipulated the language. And if you don't get on board with the language, you're a bad person. So immediately people are like, I can't say anything.
What you said about what they want, Buck, is so important. They want power. And they want to dominate. Right. And when I was talking about, it comes back to my idea of the social justice pie. This is into magical powers, my friend. This is when you eat that pizza, you don't just get, I was talking about it before in terms of affirmation, and you will get that. You're going to get all the likes on Facebook when you say that you're trans or whatever. But you are also going to be given this power and no responsibility. They say with great power comes great responsibility. It's great power and no responsibility, because as you've said, this actually leads to something I really wanted to talk about, which is you said something in another interview I watched with you. I think it was your interview with Benjamin Boyce, which was a little while back. You said something really interesting, which is you describe your experience as, I think the quote was, I changed my body so that other people would see me as I see myself. And that's a really interesting part of this conversation, what you said, because what we see with trans activists is that they simply demand that there's no I in that, in their version. In their version, it's just it's just like, you must do this. Like, there's no, I didn't do anything. Like, the thing that's so provocative about that is that today's social mandate basically says that we're supposed to imbue these people with affirmation of their self-image and power, a lot of power. And that we're supposed to do that even if it goes against what we're seeing with our own eyes, what we're feeling, what our sense of biology, our sense of reality, our worldview. And what you said is provocative, even though it shouldn't be, because it actually puts some responsibility and onus on on the person. You said something that sentence starts with, I did X. You did something because you wanted people to be more comfortable calling you a man, treating you as a man. And I think that, man, does that piss people off, the idea that they have to do anything because they just want the power. They want the quickest sort of straight line path to a piece of that social justice pie. And that's one of the key things for people to understand, is that it can be about acceptance. In your case, I think it's very obviously about acceptance, about just wanting to live your life in the best way possible for you. You never wanted to dominate anybody. And then for other people, but for the TRAs, that's a good way, the trans radical activists, that the desire for power is, it's pretty clear if you're really observing what they're doing and how they're doing it. And for everyone listening to this show, I got to tell you that what Buck said, that's what's happening. Is these people want power. If you're confused and you don't understand why this is happening, that is one of the most important things you could take away from this interview, just for people who are listening.
I appreciate that you hear that, because as a person who's inside of it, I see it all, and manipulate how they try to push me out. That's why they keep trying to cancel me. You can't cancel me. Ain't gonna happen. Never gonna happen. First off, I'm not gonna let it happen. Secondly, I don't fear you. Cancellation is fear. It's connected to fear, right? I better not say anything. No, go fuck yourself. I'll say whatever I want. I'll be friends with J.K. Rowling. I'll keep spewing what I need to spew. good luck canceling me, my friend, because I want people to see if we don't start standing up, someone has to stand up. And so I'll take it. The old tranny will take it because I got here for a reason. And you know what? I will stand up and I'll start saying things. And because...
You go by Tranpa.
Yeah, that's right. I'm Tranpa. But that being said, I see other people jumping on now, right? I see other people saying, I'm going to stand up. Because we all see the manipulation happening, and that's gaslighting. And so people are scared. When you gaslight, right, you get stuck in this weird spiral because that's what gaslighting is. You start questioning, like, and I'm like, wait a minute, people. That's why I have to be on your show. Because there are people here who don't know me, people here who don't understand what's going on, but they're like, something weird is happening. They're questioning it, but they feel weird about questioning it. I know that. But don't feel weird about questioning what's going on because it's an actual reality thing that's happening here. That domination of women's spaces, to say trans women are women, to say that they can also compete against biological women, that they can go into spaces of biological women, is actually gaslighting. And it's not the way the trans community is a healthy community. When we start to do that, we start to override the rest of the world. We're 0.5% of the population. How are we that powerful right now? And why are we giving so much away from... I was a woman for half my life. I understand that space. It's not easy to live as a woman. And so why I really talk about my space of being a woman and understanding women's rights and what that means within the trans space.
Yeah, that's been one of the most interesting aspects of all of this is the collision around like 2017 that happened between feminists and trans radical activists. I did not see that one coming, actually. I thought that they were just going to like be holding hands into the sunset because for a while, I mean, they're both kind of left-wing causes that fall into that woke, you know, but then there was a big schism, and to the credit of a lot of feminists who have to deal with being called a TERF all the time, but I'll just call them feminists, they have stood up for biological reality. You know, it's interesting insofar that it was at a time where it really started to impact them directly, but, you know, I'll take my allies wherever I can get them.
That's right.
I say it that way because I've been critical of feminism on my channel, but I'd be very happy to have
some of feminism is gross. Some feminism is gross. That's not, I'm a feminist on some level, but some of it's nasty. Yeah. And there's nasty ones out there who will never see me as a man, who will always call me a woman. You know, those are the ones that are kind of nasty. You don't need to do that. I'm trying to work with you here. You know what I mean? I respect your space, and I know who you are and what's going on. But I'm not part of that nasty trans community, yet they come after me all the time, call me all kinds of names. Just, you know, that's that nasty part, which, you know, again, on some level, living as a woman, I get it. It's not easy to live in the world as a woman. It just isn't. And here's the question I always want to ask people, especially trans women who say they're women. Like, what does that even mean? I'm a woman, right? Like, if you ask me right now, what does it mean to be a man? You're going to hear total silence. I have no idea what it means to be a man. I could never tell you what it means to be a man. I can only tell you what it means for me to feel, right? To have a feeling of walking the world and the way the world interacts with me. That's my idea of being a man, is the way that the world interacts with me. And so I don't think there's a definition on some level, yet at the same time, trans women will say things that don't really relate to biological women. And that's why biological women get very mad. For them, it's not a feeling to be a woman, right? For me to be a man, it is a feeling. That's why I say that I'm not a biological man, because it's different. Me and your idea of masculinity or male being man is probably totally different.
Yeah. Well, and that distinction is it's core to the whole conversation that we're having, and it's something that, I mean, we just have to say it over and over and over and over again because the opposite is being. I mean, literally the point where there are Twitter posts where it's just like trans women are women.
Ah, it's so annoying.
It's a magical incantation. It's literally like. I'll bring it back to, it's like Black Lives Matter, it's like Believe All Women, it's like all of these things that are, I call them the magic words. It's just things that people say because they think it makes them a better person or whatever, or that it puts them on the right side of history, right? They're creating a permanent record on Twitter of look how right I was.
Totally.
And, God willing, they're going to be proven wrong.
They are. It's already,
well, on that
it's
note,
already happening.
Yeah.
You know, you and I have, it's already happening.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk more about that. I mean, how hopeful are you that maybe we're turning a corner on this issue? I know particularly actually in other countries, it seems like in the UK and across Europe, they've really started to turn a corner. Because there was like a self-ID bill, I believe, in the United Kingdom that got defeated. And that's like a really big deal. But in the United States and Canada, I don't know. I mean, like I know Canada had the whole Jordan Peterson thing, which kind of, the bad guys won that one, at least for the time being. And then here, it's, I don't know. I'm not necessarily pessimistic, but I guess every time I think about this issue, I'm always like, why are we even having to have this fight? But I mean, where does your optimism come from? I know that, like you were saying before, a lot more detransitioners are coming out talking about their experience. There was even a 60 Minutes piece, actually, to the credit of NBC. Right. They did do a pretty good piece about detransitioners. What are some of the other points of optimism that you have on this issue that maybe we're turning a corner and voices like yours are?
Well, I think there's more voices like mine coming out, number one, so that's huge, right? Because we can't fight this with 3 people, pushing against this mob of insanity. Yeah. But more people are starting to see the reality of what's happening because of detransitioners, who happen to be heroes as far as I'm concerned, and why I very much support detransitioners. They are part of the trans community, whether the trans community wants to admit that or not. They are part of the trans community. They can actually help us figure out what we're doing wrong, and why do we have a fucking group of 25,000, right? 25,000 on Reddit is insane to me, and that should, but the trans community keeps pushing that away. So yeah, I'm an optimistic kind of person. You didn't know that about me. I am very optimistic. I always am. I believe that things can come back around. And remember, what goes up must come down. That's an actual real thing. So when you do things out of deceit, dishonesty, which is what's happening in the trans, it ain't gonna last. It's not going to last. But the problem with that also is these fucked up laws get changed in Texas, and that are so radical and so pushing against everything that me and other elders built in this community in order for us to get our medication and to be respected in that space. We're losing out on that too. So now I see, because the left, the loony trans activists push so hard, then now the other side is just going to push back hard, right? So my whole point in this world is to build a bridge. You're never going to be able to take this space, or it's just not going to work. But the way that I have really functioned in the world is building bridges. And building bridges is a huge, amazing thing that you can do. But these sides don't want to build bridges. So what's happening now is this is like literally crash, because there is no foundation under here. It's like crashing. So that being said, I think people like you and other people who hear me and other people and have me on your shows, and we start to talk about this, it's going to make the change that we need to have, which is to tighten up trans healthcare. And what I mean by that is 100% need to implement mental health care. We have taken mental health care off the table. This is a mental health problem that I have. And if I didn't have any mental health care, I would not be here, because this doesn't mean anything. My physical appearance is just my physical. But if I'm not working on the mental part of my physical experience, then I'm not going to last. But I've lasted this long because I really have been through tons of mental health care. So I do see things coming back in a way that I think could be healthier. And, I want people to be able to transition. But I want them to be able to transition in a way that they don't look back. When you look back, you did not transition properly.
And this position that you're espousing is, I think, the position of like 95% of the population, Buck. But it's not the position. But if you took a poll of it, even an anonymous poll, it wouldn't come out 95%. Nope. People are so scared, and that's why, me sitting here, I'm not trans, having this conversation, risking that maybe YouTube decide to hit the delete button, and we'll deal with that. But it's like it's important, and then people like you, coming on to have these conversations. What you said about the dialectic aspect of this is very important, because and I guess part of what I want to start doing is I want to stop, I want to stop like sweating profusely whenever this comes up, because even though I'm willing to talk about it, it does make me nervous. I mean, it does. Yeah, it's like, man, I know I'm gonna get like a tour. I mean, my channel is small enough that I don't know if I've really been like discovered yet by the people, but maybe this will be the one. Right? They find me and they're like, oh, this guy. But yeah, it's like people need to confidently assert their view of reality here. Because what your position, that you want people to be able to transition, but just to do it the right damn way, in a way that will make them happier. Right. That is the position of, I feel like, 95% of the population. I think people just want to be in a world where reality is respected and biology is understood. And I mean, you at the very early on in this interview, you mentioned you are biological woman, but you are a trans man, and you want to live in the world as a man and be treated as a man to the extent that it is possible. And I think that's a compromise that people are more than willing to make, again, like 95% of the time. And so it kills me that it doesn't feel like it's 95% of people that believe it, but I'm pretty sure it is. When you talk to people in a private space, they'll whisper to you like, I actually
That's right.
you. You know, like,
That's right.
they'll tell you. And yet we are being ruled by that 5%.
Right.
So it really is important for people to not just talk about this stuff, but to do so with confidence. You've got reality and biology and people like Buck on your side, people who come from this community who are proof positive that you don't have to be a bigot to believe in reality. You could be a transsexual man and believe in this stuff.
And that's why I do this, and that's why I'm honored to be on a show like yours, because there are people out there who don't know who I am but are scared to say the things. And when they hear from an actual real person who transitioned such a long time ago and has a beautiful life, and I've never asked for anything from the world other than just to respect my choice. I don't want anything from you. I just want you to call me he, and I can move through the world, and I can create my businesses, and I'm a hugely successful person. And that's where we as transsexual people come from. We want to just be accepted and move through the world. We don't want all this drama. This drama is being created for a reason. And that's what I don't understand, other than the fact that domination comes back into play, right? When they tell you, you've got to do this, people are pushing back on that because you can't tell me how to speak. You can't tell me I can't do this or that just because I'm transphobic. That stuff is only going to last that much longer. People are fed up with it, as I am. And so I'm going to lead this charge of we're going to change this, because we live in America, my friend. If you don't like my opinion, change the channel. But I'm going to sit here and tell you my opinion, whether you like it or not, or go move to Russia, where they'll shut down everything for you. And that's what people need to start seeing. What's happening in Russia right now is what these trans people are trying to do with us, literally shut us down, and we can't be on Instagram, Facebook, or anything. We immediately get shut off the channel. So if that's the country you want to live in, you go right ahead. But I'm not going to live in that country, and I'm going to speak up because I believe in freedom of speech, whether it hurts my feelings or not.
Wonderful, Buck. One of the what we're doing is so important. What you're saying is so important. One of the things I always try to do on the show, and you've already kind of done this, but you might end up repeating yourself a little bit, but I want to make sure I ask you this specific question, because I always do this on my show, is I always try to ask people that we not just talk about the issue, but that we talk about solving the issue, which you kind of talked about. You're talking about how important the conversational aspect is. But I want to ask you specifically now as my final question, how do you think we as a society, in the moment that we're in, which is, it's a bit of a challenge, but how do you think we can, in this moment, strike the right balance between acceptance of people like you, letting transsexual people live their lives, but also not sort of having a slippery slope effect where we end up ceding ground to the trans radical activists on the notions of basic biology, the inherent differences between men and women? How do we strike that balance? Because it seems like there's a balancing act that we need to do. How do you think we can do that?
That's a great question. And so that's what I try to do, and what I have been doing prior to these people coming and ripping the whole system out. I believe in systems. Systems actually, especially for a transsexual person, you need a system to go through. We used to actually have a system. You had to go to therapy for 2 years. You had to live as a trans person, as a man or woman, however you wanted to live, and that social transition. Then you had to get a note and go to that's today what they call gatekeeping. And so I believe systems will pull all of this back, give us a structure within our own space. Then the rest of the world can see, oh, I get it. These people have gender dysphoria. They don't feel right. And then they see people like me go, oh, I'm making business. I'm doing shit. I'm paying taxes. I have a family. They're like, oh, it totally makes sense to me. That's what I want the world to see, that we are here. Trans people will be here forever, but we need our own system. We have failed. We, as a trans community, have failed ourselves and have failed the system by implementing shit like self-ID, you don't need dysphoria, all of this shit, and they did that, I'm going to go back to, dominance. So until you, as my ally, and you as my medical community, start to realize you made the mistake by letting the medical world say, oh yeah, we'll give 13-year-olds top surgery, that's bullshit. That is actual bullshit. No 13-year-old should ever have top surgery. That is unbelievable, without any mental health care. So I'm going to say it again, structure. Structure is important in so many spaces in the world, but we as a trans community need to get structure back, and we do not have it, and it's a fucking willy-nilly space that has become very toxic and dangerous.
Buck, thank you so much. I think that's a perfect place to end it, and I think that's great stuff. And I think you're doing a great job being part of the solution on this issue. I really enjoyed my prep for this show. Of course, I was watching some of your other interviews, like I mentioned, and it was really a pleasure just to hear from you, even before getting to kind of talk with you. And it's been a pleasure to talk with you. But before we sign off, I do want to give you a chance to promote. It's my second to last question when I ask that, because the last question is, what do you want to talk about just in terms of where you are on social media, things you want to promote, anything in the world? Let my audience know where they can find your stuff or anything. You can promote anything you want.
So you can find me on buckangel.com, on IG Buckangel, on Twitter Buckangel. Watch out for Twitter. It's totally insane. But that being said, I work in the sexual wellness field, and I also work in cannabis, and I'm all about creating wellness in the world. And it doesn't necessarily mean trans, it just means for people. And I've learned to move through the world through sex, really accepting my body sexually, and I believe a lot that sex can help people move forward in the world. So those are other aspects of what I do in the world. And so if you just want to check me out, that's where I'm at. So that's it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Buck. Everybody be sure to check that stuff out. And thank you for listening to the Veritas podcast. You know that if you're listening to this, I want you to leave me a 5-star review on iTunes, and I want you to like, comment, subscribe on YouTube for more of these types of conversations. I appreciate y'all listening. I will see you next time on the Veritas podcast.